There are a couple of standard theories when it comes to studying the self in interpersonal communication, one of which is what's called the JoHari Window. This is something that was put together by Joseph Luft and Harry Ingham back in the late 60s. And it's a pretty good device to go through and see how one defines themselves, their self, one defines their self, there we go, through disclosure and how that disclosure comes about. I've subtitled this Disclosures in the Hidden Pain because it's the hidden pain that becomes pretty significant in this in terms of how we end up putting ourselves out there, how we allow ourselves to be seen, like Brene Brown would talk about. And you don't know what that means yet. You will here in just a minute, though, as we get into the whole idea of the JoHari Window. So what I want you to do is, in your notes, I would like you to go through and create a window pane with 4 panes that looks something like this. Okay, these 4 quadrants then represent both an x-axis and a y-axis. I know it's math, and I know you're comm majors, but bear with me here, okay? On one of those axes then, on the top, I want you to write what's known to you in the first column. In the second column, what is unknown to you, just like this, okay? And then on the other axis side, what is known to others on the top one, okay? And then below that, what is unknown to others. I'm hoping you see a pattern. You see then how these go through and intersect each other. For example, what's known to others and what is known to you is called the open pane. See how that works? And then what is unknown to you and what is known to others, we know this as the blind pane. What is unknown to others and unknown to you is the unknown pane. Okay, and then lastly, what is unknown to others but what is known to you is what we call the hidden pain. So I'm going to go through each of these pains and talk about their characteristics and how they function in disclosure and helping us identify ourselves. The first one and the easiest one to identify is the open pain because it's stuff that we have put in there. We've allowed to be seen there. We've been able to be vulnerable to put it out there perhaps, or maybe it was placed there because somebody forced us to, or maybe we just put a bunch of stuff up on Facebook, right? Because that is about the most open pain there is. If you looked at my Facebook page, you would know that I'm married to this amazing woman, that we have 2 golden retrievers, that I have a son and a daughter who are extraordinary individuals, as well as 3 other stepchildren that way. You know that I keep a blog on our overlanding adventures and that I built this overland vehicle and I'm a photographer in doing overlanding. You would know that I teach at Dixie State, that I live in North Salt Lake, that I'm married to Mindy Fabrizio Young. My hometown is in Livermore, California, and I'm followed by a few people that way. My daughter just graduated from high school. My son and I just went and got some crepes after going off-road for a while. I wrote a novel called To Risk, and I wrote another anthology called I'm No Saint. Shameless plug. You can find them both on Amazon. My son got married a little while ago. I used to work in the aerospace industry. I built this overland vehicle a few years ago. Let's see, we love to travel. We go across the world. We also like to travel in our own backyard, one of our favorite camping spots there. I won't tell you where it is or I'd have to kill you. I do a lot of off-road on a motorcycle as well. I love Waffle Love, particularly because they make a real authentic Belgian waffle. I'm concerned, a citizen. I'm concerned about the civics of our nation and our state, and I have a tendency maybe to think a little too much. Wow, that's all in my open pain. And there's a lot more to that, mainly because I'm a pretty open guy for the most part, okay? I'm fascinated always. I teach social media, so I'm fascinated in how much stuff we're willing to put out there, and then how we become surprised that perhaps we feel like our privacy has been violated later on down the road. Interpersonally, without that social intermediary, we share information in our open pane, and when we do, okay, that's disclosure, and that stays there. That person then knows that, if they can remember, they know that about you. And because of the axioms of communication, you can't take it back. Once you put it out there, it's out there. Okay, so the next square then is what is unknown to you, but what is known to others, and we call this the blind pane. And you've had some experience with this. You've had your mom or your boss or somebody a friend, and come up and tell you something about yourself that you didn't know, like maybe your fly is down. I used to think when I first started teaching at Dixie State that it came off as this little teddy bear, only to find out from my students that I really came off as this kind of a bear instead. And so I had to go through and become more aware of how I was coming across in terms of my nonverbal displays, in terms of the tone of my voice, and so on. One thing people tell me is that I look like this guy. And when I first heard this, I was taken aback from my blind pain. I didn't think I looked anything like Russell Crowe. I still don't think so either. And then somebody told me I look like this guy, Paul Giamatti. Maybe it's the glasses, the furrowed brow. I'm not sure, but I kind of reject that. And that's what's cool about the blind pain is when people take stuff out of that and they stick it in your open pain, you can go through and say, yeah, okay, I get that. Or you can go through and say, I don't think so. And while denial ain't just a river in Egypt, there are some things that are true that we don't perhaps want to accept about ourselves. And that's when it's time for maybe some more cause of reflection. The source of the information for the blind pain also matters. Okay, you get something from your significant other, or something from a parent, something from somebody who's close to you, might have a little bit more significance than somebody who doesn't know you. So some things to take into consideration there. All right, let's move down then to the lower right-hand pane. This is what is unknown to others and what is unknown to us, and so we call this the great unknown pain. In my previous life, I used to travel a lot. In fact, I accumulated enough miles to become a member of Delta's Million Mile Club. And it wasn't until I was flying back to Salt Lake City from New York City when our plane didn't just run into turbulence, it got into a downforce that where we experienced zero gravity. First time I had done that in all the time I've been on an airplane. And it terrified me to the point to where I had to have some help to get off the airplane by the time I got back to the gate in Salt Lake City. And I didn't know that, okay? This is something that was foreign to me because of my experience in flying. And then to have this happen, and suddenly now I have great anxiety when I get on an aircraft. I mean, I don't get drugged or anything that way or go through hypnosis, but it bugs me to go through and do that. I've also had experience with, this sounds weird, I know, but with ship hulls. And I went scuba diving off the coast of Catalina, and we went diving underneath our ship that we were on. We were on a rather large vessel, and I went scuba diving underneath it, and it freaked me out. And that's an old fear that comes from a deeper, darker time in my life, and boom, it came out of my unknown pain and into my open pain, and now I avoid scuba diving underneath large ships. It's weird, I know, but that's the best I can come up with. We've got all kinds of unknown things happening nowadays, especially, like in London here. Great Britain's been the victim thrice now of terrorist attacks, horrible things happening over there. And that's what terrorism does, is it capitalizes on our unknown pain. We can't prepare for it. We don't know if it's ever going to happen. In fact, most of us, or at least here in the United States, go about our day-to-day routines without even thinking about the idea that somebody might jump a sidewalk and run a crowd over, or that there might be a dirty bomb somewhere in a garbage can next to the Maverick, or whatever the case might be. We don't live that way, mainly because we don't have that experience. What's fascinating about what's going on in terms of this kinds of terrorism, this is from the bomb that exploded in the Brussels airport. People are becoming more terrorist savvy. So it's moving from that unknown pain and now more into the open pain at a horrible, tremendous, traumatic price. There are people who prepare for the unknown. They spend their careers going through training and preparation in order to take on whatever context that they get involved in order to protect others in what's happening. But no matter what kind of training is out there, I don't think anybody is completely and fully prepared. The unknown pain. And that brings me around to this one, and this is the one that really we'll be focusing on over the course of the semester. And like I talked about in terms of context, the psychological context, um, when we communicate, the main psychological context for us when we are disclosing interpersonally deals with the pain that is unknown to others but is known to us, and this is what we call the hidden pain. And you've been there at some point. You've disclosed something to somebody else at great risk. You were vulnerable in doing so. You decided to allow yourself to be seen. And in doing so, as that went from the hidden pain up into the open pain, you probably learned something about yourself as well. And in fact, this type of self-disclosure starts to identify us. That's why this is so important to understand. You might think, well, I'm just talking. I'm just going through and relaying an experience or whatever the case might be. But we formulate better ideas when we articulate them, when we think them out loud, or when we write them down. That's why journaling is such a great activity as well. I have an activity that I do with my in-class students at this point. I introduce them to the hidden pain. We talk about what kind of stuff is down in this box. What do we tote around with us all this time throughout our lives for a lot of people that we never bring out of that hidden pain up into the open? And what's interesting about this is as students give me feedback on this, they say, well, it's stuff that I'm ashamed of, or it's past deeds that sins or transgressions or bad habits, or I was arrested as a DUI, or I used to, whatever. And it's I'm fascinated because not many positive things come out here in the hidden pain. And when we talk about it, I try not to make it deep and dark and scary. I just say, this is the hidden pain. What do we keep down there? And that's kind of the default answer. Well, I used to do this activity where we would get to this point in the discussion, and then I would hand out a 3x5 card to the students in the classroom. And they would go through, I'd ask them to write on this card something that they have never disclosed to anybody. And that's a little nerve-wracking as students come face to face with something that they have tucked away deep and didn't want to address to begin with. Now I'm asking them to become very public with that in a way. And they would go through and write these disclosures down on these cards. In fact, what you're looking at here is a stack of cards from a particular class. This was a while ago. I have about 2,000 of these disclosures that I've gone through and categorized. I'll come back to that here in just a minute. And you can see here that I believe that I'm an amazing person, that I'll have the opportunity to do something truly outstanding. And this is one of the very few positive cards. I have 4 out of 2,000, okay, that were submitted. You can see the one behind this, that was the one of many that is very frightening to me and it concerns me deeply. It says, I wish I were dead. You can read more about this if you click on the disclosures document in this week's module on campus. In fact, I'm going to ask you to do so, to read through that whole thing so you have a better idea here of the power of self-disclosure. So let me come back to the model itself then. The hidden pain, through my research, we have about 6 different types of disclosures down there. The first one, and these are really in no particular order, but the one that was probably the most ubiquitous was what I call discrete disclosures. These are disclosures that have some kind of sexual overtone. They've been abused, or they were raped, or something along that line that they've kept inside and never disclosed as a result of that. The second is what I call penitent disclosure. They broke a law, some kind of rule, a transgression, and then this becomes a confession then for the penitent. The third one is dark disclosure, and these are disclosures that are disturbing, and the disclosures that require, I believe, intervention on all our parts. It's where they're feeling that they're not good enough, that they're not beautiful enough, that they're not spiritual enough, or whatever. And again, the repetition that I had in these dark disclosures is very disconcerting. The fourth one is fearful disclosure. I'm afraid to be alone. I'm afraid of the future. I'm afraid of not graduating. I'm afraid of my parents' expectations. All kinds of fears happening there. And speaking of parents, relational disclosures were pretty easy to identify as well, in terms of I love my dad, I hate my stepmom, whatever. There was something relational happening. The rarest, though, like I said, in all of these that I've acquired, is what I call a beautiful disclosure. And that makes me sad. You can't ignore the tragedy of how few beautiful disclosures there are amongst all the others. And it's a symptom that I believe we need to recognize and somehow treat within not just society, but within this process of education, within that educational process. And that's what I'm hoping to do here within this class in interpersonal communication. So that's the self-concept as it applies to the JoHari window. Make sure you also take a look at the self-concept. The other video, I'm trying to remember the name of it. Oh, the self-concept and the 4 agreements. There we go. It's been a long day. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, you know where to find me.